Hello, Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 11, Gender Perspective on Development. Let us start this lecture with the topic Development Planning in India. Early development planning in India since the 1950s identified social welfare services as the only category which tackled problems of women among the other target groups. Such an approach was the outcome of the understanding of women as a category for whom special and separate programs, services, safeguard, etc. were put in place. Social welfare services targeted to reach out to vulnerable groups divided into several categories. The Central Social Welfare Board CSWB set up in 1953 was confronted with the endurous problems of the lack of any governmental machinery, and for welfare relation activities it undertook the task of promoting welfare through voluntary organizations. It also encouraged women's organizations to take up such activity in partnership with government. As part of this strategy, women's organizations were promoted, especially those working with the grassroots. Mahila Mandals were promoted as delivery mechanism for essential services like education, health, especially for maternal and child health, both by CSWB and Community Development Program through the first and the second 5-year plans. According to Veena Majumdar, this combination of institution building and women resource development was also expected to prepare women to participate in the political and developmental processes. Thus, through the language of these strategies reflected contemporary meaning of welfare, there was a conceptual thirst towards actively involving and stimulating the participation of women's organizations in the process of change. However, increasing bureaucratic control, top-down designing and streamlining of programs, and declining resource support to organizational and institutional development from below both reflected and contributed to the low priority and non-serious approach to basic issues in promotion of gender equality. The third, fourth and the fifth 5-year plans saw a decline in support to strategy of organization building and human resource development. The report of the National Committee on Women's Education saw some priority being accorded to women's education. From the period of the third plan, there was a distinct rise in priority according to the issue of population control. Directives from the Planning Commission from the fourth plan onward failed to integrate family planning with maternal and child health, planning for supplementary nutrition of children and nursing and expectant mothers from poverty group were not integrated with MCH. The Community Development Program 1952 was another significant step in the early years of development planning. It aimed at decentralized development in the rural areas through community efforts. In the sections to follow, let us look at various plan strategies and policies to see how and what place women had in development process. Now let us discuss the next topic, the CSWI's critics and parliamentary mandate. In the year 1971, the Ministry of Education and Social Welfare, Government of India appointed a committee called Committee on the Status of Women in India to study the status of women in India. The ministry was acting on a UN request for a status of women report for International Women's Year in 1975. The committee had two tasks. First, to examine the constitutional, legal, and administrative provisions that have a bearing on the social status of women, their education and employment, and the second, to assess the impact of these provisions. The committee came to the conclusion that there was an increase in marginalization of women in the economy and society. The CSWI report towards equality found demographic trends of declining sex ratio, disparities in the life expectancy and death rate between men and women, and the difficulties involved in women's access to literacy, education, and livelihood. It was of the view that the Indian state had failed in its constitutional responsibility of gender equality. The planning process for development in agriculture, industry, fishery, livestock, etc., and other important sectors of the Indian economy contained no acknowledgement of the millions of women involved in these sectors due to the livelihood reasons. This process of marginalization of the large majority of women in the economy, together with their neglect and de-evaluation by the society with the support of the state, definitely demonstrated gender bias. The increasing investment on education, health, and the opening of public employment opportunities had benefited a very small section of the female population. This privileged section of women were again threatened by escalation of social practices like dowry, inequality meted out as consequence of the personal laws, the non-enforcement of the existing laws which sought to be offer protection to women, and lack of women's overall visibility in the sense of the inclusion of their needs, concerns, and perspective in the planning process. Even though the parliamentary debate on the Towards Equality report sought the removal all disabilities that Indian women continue to suffer from, the declaration of national emergency 1974 to 1977, within a few weeks after it has been tabled in the parliament, pushed back any serious action on CSWI recommendations. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.